A simple DNA test was supposed to expose a curvy housekeeper as the woman who poisoned the most feared mafia boss in Boston. Instead, it uncovered a buried secret that shattered a 22-year-old lie, revealed the name of an innocent man history had condemned, and pushed an empire to the edge of collapse. Before this story ends, you'll see how the woman everyone underestimated became the only person brave enough to save the man who once held her future in his hands, and the truth that nearly destroyed everything he believed. Rain streaked the glass walls of the Black Harbor Hotel boardroom as 30 DeLuca family members watched Claire Bennett stand alone beside a marble table. Dominic DeLuca remained pale, upright. Less than 48 hours earlier, poisoned whiskey had nearly killed him. Claire wore her housekeeper's uniform. The room had judged her. Too poor to belong there. Too easy to blame. Vanessa Cross pushed a sealed DNA kit toward her. A woman's blood was found on the cork, she said. Only one woman had access to that cellar. Several guests looked over Claire's full figure with contempt. Someone whispered that servants always wanted more than wages. Another asked why an innocent woman would fear a simple test. Claire's hands trembled, but she kept them at her sides. She had survived too many rooms where women like her were expected to lower their eyes and accept whatever powerful people decided. "I'll take the test," she said, "after an independent attorney reviews the evidence. I want written limits on how my sample can be used and copies of every result." Vanessa laughed. "You don't get to negotiate." Dominic's voice cut through the room. "She just did." The laughter stopped. Dominic studied Claire, not with pity, but with the attention he reserved for people who refused to break. He ordered his attorney to meet every condition. An hour later, a laboratory liaison returned with 2 envelopes. The first cleared Claire. The blood on the bottle belonged to someone else. The attorney opened the second, read 3 lines, and lost all color. "This sample triggered a federal match," he said. "Claire Bennett is directly related to Daniel Bennett." A chair scraped backward. Dominic's expression changed. Claire asked, "Who was Daniel Bennett?" The attorney swallowed. A dead accountant tied to a sealed murder case, and to the missing ledger that could destroy the DeLuca empire. Silence settled over the boardroom until even the rain against the towering windows seemed louder. Claire searched every unfamiliar face, hoping someone would tell her the lawyer had made a mistake. Instead, people stepped farther away, as if her name had suddenly become dangerous. 3 months earlier, no one in the Blackwood estate had known who Daniel Bennett was. Claire had simply been the quiet housekeeper who arrived before sunrise, polished the marble floors, and disappeared before the guests noticed her. Wealthy visitors rarely remembered her name. Some called her the maid, while others spoke around her as though she were another piece of furniture. She never answered their insults. Her mother had taught her long ago that dignity was something no cruel voice could steal unless she surrendered it herself. After every shift, Claire rode the last bus back to East Boston, carrying groceries for an elderly neighbor before climbing the narrow stairs to the apartment she shared with her mother. While her mother rested after another exhausting heart treatment, Claire opened online accounting lessons, determined to build a better future one quiet night at a time. One rainy afternoon, Rosa asked her to organize the wine cellar before an important family gathering. As Claire compared delivery records with the bottles stacked along the stone walls, something felt wrong. 6 rare whiskey bottles carried identical labels, yet the shipment codes beneath the glass belonged to different suppliers. One signature had been copied so carefully that only a missing flourish revealed the forgery. Claire slipped the invoices into a folder instead of throwing them away. She didn't know whose secret she had uncovered. She only knew that someone inside the DeLuca empire had rewritten the truth with a pen. Above her, footsteps echoed across the mansion floor. Someone else had already realized she was asking the wrong questions. The cellar door opened, and Dominic DeLuca appeared beneath the stone archway. Rain darkened his coat, and anger marked his face after a failed negotiation at Boston Harbor. 2 guards waited behind him, but he entered alone. Claire closed the folder. "I was finishing the inventory." Dominic glanced at the bottles. Inventory doesn't usually require 3 ledgers. Most people lowered their eyes when he spoke. Claire did not. She placed the forged invoice beside the shipment list and showed him the altered prices, mismatched codes, and copied signatures. Each change was small enough to escape an accountant, yet together they diverted thousands from every delivery. "Who told you to investigate this?" he asked. "Well, no one." "Then why did you?" "Because 6 bottles claimed to come from 3 places at once." The hard line of his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile, but close to respect. Claire opened the ledger. The false entries formed a pattern stretching back nearly 2 years. If repeated across Black Harbor's warehouses, someone could be draining millions without triggering an audit. Dominic looked from the numbers to her face. "How did my finance team miss this?" Claire held his gaze. "People don't look at me, Mr. DeLuca. That gives me time to notice what they're hiding." Thunder rolled beyond the cellar walls. Dominic ordered Ethan Cole to copy every record and begin a silent review. He told Claire to tell no one, then placed the invoices inside his coat. By dawn, the employee who had signed the latest delivery had vanished. His apartment was empty. His phone lay near the harbor, and every security image of him leaving Blackwood had been erased. One detail remained. His final call had gone to Martin Vale, the advisor Dominic trusted more than anyone alive. Claire tried to push the discovery from her mind. She was only a housekeeper, and people in her position rarely survived by asking questions that belonged to powerful men. Yet every time she polished the grand staircase or folded fresh linens inside the estate, she found herself remembering the forged signatures and the missing employee whose life seemed to have been erased overnight. For the next several days, Dominic hardly appeared. Rumors spread through the mansion that negotiations with rival organizations had turned hostile. Rosa quietly warned the staff to avoid the West Wing after sunset, where Dominic often locked himself inside the old library overlooking the ocean. Late one rainy evening, Claire carried a tray of tea toward the kitchen when she noticed the library door standing slightly open. A lamp cast a weak golden glow across the hardwood floor. Inside, Dominic was leaning against a towering bookshelf, struggling to stay on his feet. His breathing was uneven, and one hand pressed tightly against an old scar beneath his jacket. A pistol rested on the desk within reach, but his strength was fading too quickly to pick it up. Claire never screamed. She quietly closed the door, drew the curtains, and crossed the room without hesitation. "I'm calling your doctor," she said. "No hospitals." "You won't need one if we act now." Her calm voice carried none of the fear he expected. While the physician rushed through a secure entrance, Claire soaked a towel in cool water, steadied Dominic's breathing, and kept him awake by asking simple questions about the harbor, the weather, even the books surrounding them. She never asked how he had been wounded or who wanted him dead. When the doctor finally arrived, he examined Dominic in silence before looking at Claire with concern. "The injury isn't causing this," he said quietly. "There's another problem." He held up the blood test. Someone has been giving Mr. DeLuca small amounts of poison. Dominic's eyes met Claire's across the room. For the first time in years, he realized the safest person beside him wasn't one of his guards. It was the woman everyone else had failed to see. Dominic was discharged from the doctor's care before sunrise, but he returned to Blackwood with new instructions. Claire was no longer assigned only to housekeeping. Quietly, without announcing it to the family, he asked Rosa to give Claire access to the estate's delivery records, wine inventory, and maintenance schedules. She frowned when Rosa delivered the message. "I'm just a housekeeper." Rosa smiled gently. Mr. DeLuca doesn't ask people to do things they're incapable of. For the first time since arriving at Blackwood, Claire felt someone had noticed more than her uniform. That fragile change lasted only 4 days. A line of black luxury SUVs rolled through the front gates, their polished doors reflecting the gray Atlantic sky. Staff members hurried into position before the lead vehicle stopped. Vanessa Cross stepped out wearing a cream-colored designer suit, every movement polished, every smile carefully measured. She greeted Dominic with practiced warmth before her eyes drifted toward Claire. "So this is the housekeeper I've been hearing about." Claire simply nodded. Vanessa's smile never reached her eyes. Throughout the afternoon, she watched Dominic ask Claire about shipment logs instead of senior managers. Every quiet answer Claire gave seemed to deepen Vanessa's irritation. That evening, the Black Harbor Foundation hosted its annual charity gala inside Boston's grand waterfront ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble while a string quartet played beneath towering windows overlooking the harbor. Claire had been assigned to supervise refreshments behind the scenes. As she crossed the ballroom carrying a tray of champagne, Vanessa stepped directly into her path. The glasses crashed onto the marble floor. The music stopped. More than 100 guests turned. Vanessa sighed dramatically. "Honestly," she said, "some people simply don't belong in rooms like this." She tossed a linen towel onto the shattered glass. "Clean it up." Claire looked at the towel, then back at Vanessa. Her voice stayed calm. "I'll clean the floor." She gently pushed the towel aside. "But I won't kneel so people can enjoy watching me." The silence that followed was even louder than the broken crystal. Then the ballroom doors slowly opened. Dominic had just arrived, and every eye turned toward him. The ballroom fell silent, except for the soft echo of a violin fading into nothing. Dominic crossed the polished floor without rushing, his attention fixed on Claire instead of the broken crystal scattered around her shoes. Vanessa stepped forward first, her expression perfectly composed. "Your housekeeper stole my diamond bracelet," she announced. "I found it missing minutes before she dropped those glasses." Several security guards moved toward Claire. She didn't run. "I didn't take it," she said quietly. Vanessa folded her arms. "Then you won't mind if they search your room." Within minutes, the staff quarters were turned upside down. A velvet jewelry pouch appeared beneath Claire's dresser, and murmurs spread through the hallway before anyone confirmed what was inside. One guard proudly lifted the bracelet. "There it is." Claire stared at it in disbelief. "I've never seen that before." Vanessa looked almost sympathetic. "How disappointing." Dominic held out his hand. No one says another word. The hallway froze. Instead of taking the bracelet, he examined the evidence bag. His eyes settled on a printed security seal carrying the identification code of Officer Daniels. He looked toward Ethan. When did Daniels begin tonight's shift?" Ethan checked his tablet. He didn't. He's off duty until tomorrow morning. Dominic looked back at the bag, then explained why his security code sealed evidence collected 20 minutes ago. No one answered. Dominic ordered every surveillance recording from the guest wing to be projected inside the ballroom. The footage skipped forward normally until Vanessa left her suite. Then the screen went black. Exactly 17 minutes had vanished. Ethan quietly confirmed the files had been deleted from the central server. Dominic turned toward the guests. "In this family," he said, "status does not replace proof." His voice remained calm, but every word landed like stone. "The accusation against Claire Bennett is withdrawn." He faced the head of estate security. "You searched an employee without verified evidence." The man's face drained of color. "You're relieved of duty. Effective immediately." Vanessa's smile disappeared for the first time that evening. Later, outside beneath the cold Atlantic wind, Claire thanked Dominic for believing her. He answered honestly, "I didn't protect you because I trusted you." She looked at him. "I protected the truth." Claire nodded slowly. "One day," she said, "I hope I won't need you to walk into the room before people remember I deserve that." Dominic watched her leave, unable to answer. Across the parking lot, Vanessa stepped into a waiting car and dialed an unlisted number. "He defended her," she whispered. A man's calm voice replied, "Then we're out of time." The call ended. Inside the darkness, Martin Vale quietly smiled. 2 nights later, Blackwood Estate welcomed executives, attorneys, and shipping partners for a private strategy dinner. Crystal glasses reflected the candlelight, while conversations drifted through the historic dining hall. Claire moved quietly between the tables, noticing details others ignored. Dominic had barely touched his whiskey. That alone felt strange. He always sampled every rare bottle himself before serving guests. Tonight he lifted the glass, hesitated for the briefest moment, then took a single sip. Less than a minute later, the color drained from his face. His hand tightened around the crystal before the glass slipped onto the tablecloth, spilling amber liquid across the linen. Several guests stood at once. Someone shouted for an ambulance. Claire reached Dominic before anyone else. "Don't let anyone touch the glass," she said firmly. Her voice stopped Ethan halfway across the room. Instead of rushing toward Dominic, Claire carefully covered the overturned glass with a silver serving dome. She picked up the whiskey bottle using a folded napkin and placed both items on a separate tray. "If this was intentional," she said, "every fingerprint matters." Only then did she kneel beside Dominic. His breathing had become shallow. "The doctor," Ethan called. "No," Claire answered. "Call the same physician who treated him before. Tell him to bring toxicology equipment." Dominic forced his eyes open. "You noticed." "You hesitated before drinking," Claire whispered. "You already suspected something." Minutes later, the physician arrived through the private entrance. Blood samples were taken immediately. No one was allowed to leave the estate. The doctor looked up from the first rapid screening, his expression turning grave. The poison wasn't enough to kill him tonight. The room fell silent. It was another small dose. Claire slowly turned toward the whiskey bottle resting beneath the silver dome. Someone hadn't planned one attack. Someone had been poisoning Dominic little by little for weeks. As investigators sealed the dining room, Vanessa stepped forward with measured concern. "If the bottle was handled by staff," she said softly, "everyone who entered the wine cellar should be eliminated as suspects." Martin nodded thoughtfully, starting with Claire. Before anyone could object, a forensic investigator lifted a tiny blood trace from the bottle's cork. The technician looked toward Dominic. "Sir, we'll need a DNA comparison." Claire met Dominic's eyes. This time she didn't look afraid. She looked ready for the truth. The DNA samples were sealed under the supervision of an independent forensic examiner before anyone else could touch them. Dominic insisted on the procedure himself. No member of the DeLuca family objected, though the room remained heavy with suspicion. Claire waited in silence. Hours later, everyone gathered inside the same glass boardroom overlooking Boston Harbor. The poisoned whiskey bottle rested inside an evidence case, untouched since the dinner. Rain rolled across the windows exactly as it had the night Dominic almost died. The examiner broke the seal. "The blood recovered from the cork does not belong to Claire Bennett." A quiet wave of relief crossed Ethan's face. Vanessa's did not change. The examiner continued. "However, federal kinship screening produced an unexpected match." He projected a sealed government file onto the large screen. Daniel Bennett. Claire frowned. "I've never met anyone by that name." The examiner nodded. "That would be impossible. Daniel Bennett died 22 years ago." Murmurs spread across the room. He served as a forensic accountant for Black Harbor Holdings before the DeLuca organization became what it is today. Another page appeared. He was publicly identified as the financial traitor responsible for the disappearance of confidential ledgers and the murder of a federal witness. Claire's heartbeat quickened. "My father died before I could remember him." The examiner looked directly at her. "According to this record, Daniel Bennett was your father." The room exploded with disbelief. Several board members stood at once. One elderly relative whispered that the Bennett bloodline had nearly destroyed the family decades earlier. Dominic remained perfectly still. He remembered hearing Daniel's name only once as a child, before his own father ordered every document burned and every conversation ended. Martin slowly folded his hands. "What unfortunate timing," he said softly. "Perhaps we've finally learned why Miss Bennett became so interested in our records." Claire stared at him. "I came here to earn a paycheck." Her voice never shook. "If my father was guilty, prove it with facts. If he wasn't, then someone buried the truth before I was old enough to ask." Dominic looked from Claire to the sealed file. For the first time, he questioned whether the history that had shaped his empire had been built on a lie. By the next morning, everything around Claire had changed. 2 security vehicles waited outside her apartment in East Boston. Armed guards stood outside the grocery store she visited, the hospital where her mother received treatment, and every entrance to Blackwood Estate. Dominic called it protection. Claire called it another prison. "You could be the next target," he told her inside his office overlooking Boston Harbor. "I know. I won't let anything happen to you." She met his eyes. "Then stop deciding my life without asking me." The words lingered between them. Dominic had spent years protecting people by surrounding them with walls, guards, and locked gates. He had never considered that safety without freedom could feel like punishment. Days passed. Claire continued reviewing old financial records under constant escort. Every hallway echoed with footsteps that were not her own. Even Rosa whispered that the mansion no longer felt like a home. One rainy afternoon, Claire entered the estate archive while 2 guards waited outside. Hidden behind shelves of forgotten ledgers, she found a faded photograph tucked inside an accounting journal. 3 men stood beside Boston Harbor. One was Dominic's late father. Another was a young Daniel Bennett. The third was Martin Vale. On the back, someone had written a single sentence. "Partners. Summer, 2004. Claire stared at the words. If Daniel had truly betrayed the DeLuca family, why was he smiling beside the very men who supposedly condemned him? She hurried to Dominic's office. He studied the photograph for a long moment before lowering it onto his desk. "I've never seen this." Claire looked toward the guards outside his door. "If you really trust me," she said softly, "stop protecting me long enough to let me investigate." Dominic remained silent. Every instinct told him to refuse. Every lesson Claire had taught him whispered otherwise. That evening, he dismissed the guards assigned to follow her. "You'll have your freedom," he said, "but promise me one thing." Claire nodded. "If you discover the truth," he continued, "don't hide it from me, even if it destroys everything my family believes." As she walked away, neither of them noticed the small camera hidden inside the hallway clock. Someone else had just watched every second of their conversation. The next afternoon, Claire returned alone to her mother's apartment in East Boston. She said nothing about the photograph, the hidden camera, or the danger surrounding the DeLuca family. Her mother had already endured enough worry. While searching an old closet for winter blankets, Claire noticed a worn cedar box tucked beneath a stack of faded quilts. She had never seen it before. Inside rested a silver pocket watch, scratched by time but carefully wrapped in a yellowed handkerchief. Beneath it lay a folded note in her mother's handwriting. "Your father wanted you to have this only when the truth became more important than fear." Claire's fingers trembled as she opened the watch. Etched inside the cover were 3 initials: DBB. Hidden beneath the movement was an impossibly thin strip of paper. It contained nothing except a string of numbers and shipping abbreviations. That evening, she carried the watch to Blackwood Estate and spread old warehouse ledgers across the library table. Dominic joined her without speaking. Together they compared the numbers inside the watch with freight records stored in dusty archive books. The codes matched shipments that officially never existed. Every false invoice Claire had uncovered pointed toward the same series of containers arriving through Boston Harbor more than 20 years earlier. Dominic slowly traced one entry with his finger. "My father approved these shipments." Claire turned another page. "So did Martin." A final ledger revealed handwritten initials beside every altered transaction. Not Daniel Bennett. Martin Vale. The room became perfectly still. "If Martin created the false records," Dominic whispered, "then Daniel may have been trying to expose them." Claire nodded. "Which means someone needed the world to believe my father was the traitor." Outside, thunder rolled over the harbor as rain battered the library windows. Neither of them realized Ethan had just called. Martin had requested an emergency board meeting for the following morning. According to the notice, new evidence would finally prove Claire Bennett had infiltrated the DeLuca empire on behalf of her father's criminal network. Martin was preparing to bury the truth one last time. Claire quietly closed her father's watch. "This time," she said, "he won't get the final word." Morning light washed across the glass walls of Black Harbor Holdings as the emergency board meeting began. Every seat was filled. Attorneys lined one side of the room, while senior executives avoided looking at Claire. Martin Vale stood beside the presentation screen with the confidence of a man who believed history already belonged to him. Dominic entered last. "Proceed," he said. Martin projected copies of old newspaper articles naming Daniel Bennett as the accountant who betrayed the DeLuca organization. He spoke calmly, carefully, building a story that painted Claire as the daughter of a man who had returned through her to finish what he had started. Several directors demanded Claire's dismissal. She remained seated. "Are you finished?" she asked. Martin smiled. completely. Claire stood and placed her father's watch on the marble table beside the forged invoices, the shipping ledgers, and the photographs she had discovered in the archives. My father kept records because he knew one day someone would ask the right questions. She explained the hidden shipment codes inside the watch and matched each one to the altered accounting books. Every false transaction pointed to the same approval signature. Not Daniel Bennett. Martin Vale. The independent attorney compared the documents one by one before looking toward Dominic. The codes, dates, and financial transfers are consistent. Ethan connected the final file to the screen. A restored security backup recovered from an off-site server showed Martin entering the archive 22 years earlier, carrying the original ledgers shortly before they disappeared. The room fell silent. Dominic looked at Martin. "My father trusted you." Martin's composure finally cracked. "He trusted the wrong man," he replied. He admitted Daniel had uncovered years of financial theft and refused to falsify the books. Framing Daniel had protected the operation. Dominic's older brother later discovered fragments of the same scheme, forcing Martin to silence him through the poisoning conspiracy that had continued for years. Claire lowered her eyes for a moment. Her father had not died a traitor. He had died telling the truth. Dominic rose slowly. The DeLuca empire will never again be built on a lie. Outside, police vehicles rolled through the front gate as federal investigators entered the building. Martin's long season of control had finally ended. No one applauded. The silence inside the boardroom carried the weight of 22 stolen years. Federal agents escorted Martin away without resistance. As he passed Claire, he paused for a single moment. "The truth doesn't rebuild broken families," he said quietly. Claire met his eyes. "No. But lies keep breaking them." He lowered his head and continued toward the elevator. Vanessa Cross tried to slip through a side exit, but investigators stopped her before she reached the lobby. Records recovered from her private accounts confirmed she had helped erase security footage, plant false evidence, and protect Martin's scheme for years. By sunset, the headlines had already begun to change. Daniel Bennett cleared after 2 decades. Claire stood alone on the terrace overlooking Boston Harbor, holding her father's watch as the evening light shimmered across the water. For the first time, she imagined him smiling instead of being remembered as a criminal. Soft footsteps approached. Dominic stopped beside her. "I spent my life defending an empire," he said. "You reminded me that an empire without truth deserves to fall." Claire smiled gently. "You chose the truth." "No," he answered. "You showed me where to find it." Weeks later, Black Harbor Holdings announced sweeping reforms. Independent auditors replaced secret ledgers. Honest employees received promotions based on merit instead of family loyalty. Dominic stepped away from the old traditions that had ruled his family for generations, determined to build a legitimate future worthy of the people who believed in him. He invited Claire to lead the company's new Ethics and Integrity Office. She accepted, not because she needed protection, because her voice finally had the power to protect others. One quiet Sunday afternoon, Dominic visited Claire's mother with fresh flowers and homemade bread from a neighborhood bakery. There were no guards, no speeches, and no marble boardrooms waiting beyond the front door. Only laughter around a small kitchen table. As the sun slipped below the Boston skyline, Dominic reached for Claire's hand. This time, neither fear nor secrets stood between them. The empire had survived, but something far more valuable had been rebuilt. Trust, and at last, a place they could both call home. When Dominic reached for Claire's hand at that little kitchen table, after clearing Daniel Bennett's name and choosing truth over power, it wasn't just an ending. It was the moment two broken lives finally found peace together. This story reminds us that real trust is never built by promises alone. It grows one honest choice at a time, even when telling the truth costs more than keeping a comfortable lie alive. Today, think about someone who has quietly earned your trust, the way Claire earned Dominic's. If they've stood by you through actions instead of words, don't let another day pass without letting them know how much they matter. Have you ever had to choose between protecting the truth and protecting someone's reputation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story stayed with you after the final scene, stay with us, because the next journey may challenge your heart in an entirely different way.